All right, welcome back. Intro to Web 3223. We're going to be going over HTML tags. So this is going to be the start of the actual physically doing technology portion of this course instead of focusing on the design aspects of the course. But with that said, we're going to start off relatively slowly and traditionally speaking, if you have been a part of this course at Alfred State, HTML tags, the professor that did this before would take 4 to 5 weeks just on this. I do not see how that was humanly possible to do that. HTML tags are very, very simple and they're incredibly abstract. There is really nothing in here that requires explanation except for the stuff that I'm going to go over today, and it's going to be extraordinarily quick because there's just not that much to it because everything is conditional. So when we start talking about a little bit more conditional things, we'll spend a little bit more time on that, and that's going to be things like CSS Grid and Flexbox. But until we get there, this portion, HTML itself, is a building block. There's not a whole lot to cover here, okay? So the reason why I went on that little rant was because if you don't understand HTML tags, you're not going to until you use them, all right? And we'll practice a little bit, right, without having anything else with it, but this is just not how the web is constructed. All right, we got to get some of the foundations down first, and it doesn't make any sense to spend 3 weeks on HTML tags if it's kind of worthless on its own. Okay, so with that said, just take this information that you're about to get, just try to use this presentation and everything else that's inside of it as a reference. Don't fret too much about not understanding it because that'll come later. Okay, so the first thing that we need to talk about is what is HTML? HTML is not a programming language. It's a markup language. There is no logic done, if you do this correctly, there is no logic done in the HTML, okay? Each tag has its own logic baked behind it, right? But that's not something that you control or you see, all right? So HTML is a markup language, and primarily what HTML does is provide structure for the website. So what you should be thinking is, okay, how is this content organized? How is the content organized, and how am I going to address that content? So I have a little example over here. So right here is, well, inside developer view. So that's F12 if you don't know that already. F12, this orange little box here, here's a little bit of HTML structure. And I have this div highlighted right here. And it highlights everything in here. So this little title here for RS660, what the little text here is, and then order today. Okay, so this is a logical block of content. And this div, which we'll get into a little bit more here in a second, stands for page division, is how you do that. So here is a logical block of content. Ideally, that is how you organize your HTML. How do I organize this content in such a way where I can address a logical block of content? Okay, and same thing here with the image. Image can be addressed. The very similar pattern down here with the Toronto v4. Okay, right? This is what HTML is there for. It's structure to identify logical blocks of content on the web. So I already went over this a little bit. HTML is not a programming language, and because of separation of concerns, when these websites start to scale, you really want to separate out your logic and styling to the file types that they're supposed to be with. So if you're doing styles in the HTML, which you can, to be clear, it's very likely you're doing it wrong, okay? You have to have a very, very good reason to have CSS and JavaScript inside of your HTML. And the arguments that I have heard up to this point for, and the only argument I really hear is styling inline. It is a little faster for the browser to render it. The downside is that it becomes unreadable and unmaintainable. It does no good. Okay. So right here's a small example. Just look over this real quick. I'll give you a couple seconds to get eyes on it. All right, so let's go through a few of these tags. This first one up top here, doctype HTML. We're going to tell the browser what type of HTML we're using. So up to this point, we are on revision 5 of HTML. You might see HTML4 if you run into a legacy database. Other than that, we're using HTML5 at this point, and it's not new by any means. So HTML5 is the way to go. We have the root tag or the HTML tag, okay? Absolutely everything outside of the metadata, hey, which type of HTML we're using, all the tags have to be inside of this HTML tag, all right? Inside of this is body, so this is all your visible content. And now we're getting into actual content for the web page itself. So we got a div here, h1, another div. We got some spans. We'll go over that, the difference here in a second. But this is a logical block of content. So right here's that div. And for this course, I'm going to be calling these containers quite a bit. All right. Down here, if I can bring your attention here, right here's a little bit different thing. We got an image tag with a source attribute. We'll go over attributes here in a second. And we're going to display this image on the page. Okay, so this is what this looks like after it's been rendered on the browser. Good, nothing special here. Okay, so before we get into how that actually worked, we need to talk about the DOM. The DOM, better known as a nested string array or a jagged array, depending on who you're talking to, is a logical way of storing these tags, okay? So if I bring your attention back over here, here's your HTML tag, your root tag, then you'd have head for metadata, body, and then inside of body, you got header, navigation, nav content, the subnav, the link itself, most of the time. Got some content down here, right? Sub content. This is exactly how the DOM is stored. So inside of this body is a array, and that's going to have header and then content. Inside this header, it's going to be another array, and it's going to have navigation. All right, it's an index of 1. Well, technically index is 0. There's one item in that index or in this array of header. Navigation is going to be its own array, and it's going to have 3 indexes of nav content. Each nav content has 3 sub-nav contents. Okay, this is why it's called the jagged array, because you have nested arrays in everything. This is how the DOM is stored. Okay, we'll get into this about midway through the semester, quite a bit more, but this organization determines the path of bubble and capture events. All right. So you're going to forget by the time we get to this in the middle of the semester, but just we went over it here. Hopefully it sticks. Probably won't, but we'll cover it again. All right. Block level elements. So a block level element represented by this little content here. So these are all your block level tags. And to be clear, before I get into this anymore, there are a bunch of HTML tags out there. If you go to W3 Schools, they have the entire list. I do not have time to go over all the HTML tags. I'm going to go over the abstracted versions of it, and we're going to go over some of the common ones. But if you really need a DL, you're going to have to look that up for yourself, because if I explain it to you now, you're going to forget, and then you're going to have to look it up anyway. So why waste the time? All right. So with that said, all right, a block level element always starts on a new line, unless you have CSS to change that. Okay. But if it's just the HTML, a block level element is going to start on a new line. Okay. So this fundamentally works differently than an inline element, which we'll talk about here in a second. All right. So the way this is done in the HTML, and again, this comes to features and functionality that you don't have control over, is the block level element has what is known as a break line at the beginning and the end of that content that you put inside of the div or any other block level content or block level element. Okay. This also means that by default, that block level element is going to take the entire width of the page. Okay. So those are your properties of a block level element. You're going to have the entire width, and it's going to start on a new line. All right. Inline elements basically does the opposite. It's going to not take up the entire width, and it doesn't start on a new line. It's going to put itself right next to other inline elements. All right. Again, W3C has the list here. Here's the list of all of your inline elements. Again, too many to go over, and you're going to forget if I went over them. Attributes. This is important. Very important. Okay. This is how you control the communication between CSS and JavaScript. All right. Occasionally, you'll have an attribute like image here, where the attribute itself has functionality baked into it that is baked into the browser, where it's going to do something that you didn't have to do. So source is a good example. If you give an image tag a source, it will render an image. All right. So just to reiterate, attributes is how you communicate with CSS and JavaScript. And we'll go over exactly how that works in probably the next lecture, the next full lecture. All right, HTML tags define the root. Okay, already went over that a little bit. We have our div, stands for page division. This is your organizational content tag. All right, so you can put text in here, but most of the HTML structure is going to be a div, and most of those divs are there for containers. So this is going to be your ability to address entire logical chunks of data or content. So your CSS and JavaScript can be much more effective. And again, we'll get over into that here in a second. But just believe me for now. You need to organize your HTML in such a way where you can address this content in logical chunks. Because if you don't, it's going to make your CSS and JavaScript life basically impossible. All right. Here are your spans. Okay, inline containers. If you don't have CSS for some reason, or it's easier to do it like this, you can use a span to keep everything on one line. You have your header tags. Now, to be clear, well, first, header tags are used for screen readers, mostly. So those screen readers can actually read off the header. So again, another logical chunk of content for people that are using screen readers, so the blind. All right. I typically find that students discover that these H tags have built-in browser styles of font sizes. And I find that students find it particularly helpful that using an H3 instead of an H2 because it fits the font size correctly, people tend to turn that in. And I'm going to have to advise against that for this reason. One, you'll lose points, but two, that screen reader is officially going to be very upset. So if you have a H1, then an H3, and then an H2, how that's going to be read back to the user that's using a screen reader is the H1, and then the H2, which is after the H3, and then the H3. So it's going to be outside of logical order, and it's going to confuse the user significantly. So we do not have an accessibility course yet. We probably will eventually. And you can't, I can't let you guys do that for using header tags as font styling. It also breaks separation of concerns, which I haven't talked about yet, but you should keep all your styles inside of your CSS. All right. A tag, anchor tag, action tag, depending on who you're talking to. It's officially called an anchor tag, but again, if you're talking to the chair, it's an action tag. It helps students remember it. So a tag, anchor tag defines a hyperlink. That's it. Okay. So this action tag here, or anchor tag, it's going to be a link to the WC3 docs. Okay. I do need to call out the attribute here, the attribute of href. So hyperreference. It's going to be a link. And that is going to lead us into images with another attribute with source. Okay. Canvas. Okay. You'll end up using Canvas when you start doing anything three-dimensional, anything graphics-oriented. This is usually used with JavaScript. Okay, but it is common. You will see it. Table. Do not use a table unless you have a very, very good reason to use a table, which I'm aware of none. Okay, if you want a table style, use a div table. Don't use the actual table tag. And the reason why I show this is because, again, students get on Google and they Google a thing and Stack Overflow comes up and they don't look at the date and it says 2004 on it. And they say, hey, just use this table. Here's how you organize that. And then they get crushed because, well, they didn't use CSS, Flexbox, or Grid. All right. So this is the warning. Don't use table. Here's what it looks like. Unless you absolutely have to use it for some reason, don't. Head tag, used for metadata. This gives data about the document itself, so the HTML itself. All right. Form tag, pretty popular. I don't use it that often, but I live in my own little corner of the web development world. But this form tag is going to request a full page request. Okay. So until you get into Web 1, where you're going to be using this more often, you don't have to worry about it too much here, but a form is a very common tag. So if you see it out in the wild, you at least have seen it. And that's going to wrap it up for the presentation portion of this little lecture here. Now, again, like I said at the beginning, don't worry about understanding it. You're going to be using these a lot. The key takeaways are, okay, we got a tag that's going to be defined by the browser. If you need to look up a new tag, W3 Schools has the entire list. All right. Attributes is your ability to communicate with CSS and JavaScript. Okay. And the communication that starts that is from CSS to HTML or JavaScript to the HTML. The HTML will not communicate with CSS. The HTML will not communicate with the JavaScript. It will always be CSS or the JavaScript communicating with the HTML. Okay, those are your key takeaways. Don't worry about it too much if you don't understand it. We're going to be using it. All right, we're going to be doing a little demonstration here in just a second. All right, so that's all I got for this one. And I'll see you in the demonstration later. Okay, so welcome back. We're going to do our little first presentation here, or demonstration, be a little bit more precise. So if you don't have this already, if you're an Alfred State student, go ahead and download or get off of Discord or Blackboard or Brightspace this content that we have here. If you want to follow along. If you're on YouTube, go download any pictures that you want and then follow along as well. So what we're going to do here is create a little HTML or a little bicycle website here. So I'm going to actually, let's back up a little bit. I'm going to use Firefox as my browser, and then I'm using VS Code as well for my IDE, IDE Lite, I guess. So one of the things that I have installed already that I'm going to end up using is Live Server. So if I come down here to extensions, which is right here, all right, and then I'm just going to type in live, and it's going to be this first one right here. All right. Live server, launch a development server. All right. Mine says uninstall. Yours is going to say install if you don't already have it. Go ahead and install this if you want to follow along precisely. If you do not want to have that feature, what you can do is right click on here. You can reveal in File Explorer, or you can open with, reveal in File Explorer, double click, and it's going to open up in your web browser. Okay, so this functions as a file. Notice the path up here, S drive, Alfred, blah, 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 blah. That's a file path. Okay, so with that, I want to show you guys what we're trying to do here. I'm going to open this up with a live server. All right. Notice that we got a loopback address here, 127.0.0.1. All right. And we're going to recreate this. Okay. So we're going to have our content 1 and 2 down here. We're going to have a Monda and then Madone. All right. So we're doing Trek road bikes today. All right. So the first thing that I need to point out is I don't have anything in here. I don't have anything. So let's start with that. Okay. We're going to do index.html. Okay. And I'm also noticing that this is not in the correct folder. So for the people that didn't catch how I made that little file there, is this icon right here. I click that, made the new file. Now, with that said, I'm going to move this index.html into start. This is asking me if I want to move in the pictures. I don't. So if I close start here, it's still not going in. So I need to highlight this, and I'm going to drag over start this time to be a little bit more precise. And we're going to move, and ta-da, now it works. All right. And the next thing that I want to do is like our presentation with the images. Okay, we got one here. Oh, that was the other WebP. And then we got one here. So if you noticed over here in the final product, I have a little crop for the bike itself. Okay, and then I also have it in WebP. Okay, so I'm going to open this up real quick, reveal in File Explorer. And I'm going to show you the difference in size with these images. So the original JPEG was pretty good in terms of size, but we can do better. So both of these, Amonda, we went to WebP, 44 KB, and then Madone is 261, and we came down to 56. Okay, so we still need to convert these, and for the sake of demonstration, what I'm going to do is delete both of these WebPs, and I'm going to start over. So I'm going to highlight all these. I'm going to open. Where is my open with? Okay, I'm not going to open with. I'm going to open up GIMP. And if you have Photoshop, just open up Photoshop. If you don't have a photo editing software, download one, either GIMP or Photoshop. And what I can do here is, actually, I'll do this the long way. Okay, so I'm going to open this up full screen. I'm going to open. Okay, Abonda WebP. All right. I need to go to my storage drive, Alfred State courses, intro to web, fall. in class labs, HTML, intro, start, pictures, and both of these. Okay, now we got both images open. All right, first thing that we need to do is figure out how we actually want to crop these. So, and consistency matters. So what we can do is crop the first one. As it turns out, I'm still on crop, and I'm going to make this relative, about right. Okay, so we got a position of 0 and then a 536. We have size of 1024 and then a height of 715. So this is actually working out pretty well. And I think I'm going to keep it exactly like that. So because we didn't change the width on this at all, I only need this 715 here. All right, and I'm going to hit right in the center here to crop. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. All right. Okay, there's that. 721, we're off by a little bit. 715. We're going to move that down. We're going to crop. Both images are the same size now. Okay, now these images are quite big still. So at 1,020 pixels wide, that's too big. It's quite too big. All right. So what we're going to do, and I'm going to show you guys batch processing. If you don't have batch processing on your GIMP, which is not installed by default, let's come back over here. All right. GIMP batch processing plugin. And there's going to be this first option here, download and install that. You're going to have to restart GIMP, but then you're going to have this option right here. So pause the video if you need to, and then go do that. So I'm going to open up batch images. I'm going to add a manipulation set, and I'm going to start with resize. Okay, so at this point, you can go the percentile route. I recommend you don't. We're going to go the pixel route and change these both to pixels. So width, we're going to change width to 500. Okay. And then I'm going to change this aspect ratio to preserve. So when this actually changes in size, the height is going to reduce as much as the width relative to the aspect ratio. And because it's not 16:9 anymore, let the software calculate that for you. Okay, padding color, don't care because there is no padding. Okay, so we're good here. We're going to click this OK button. So we changed the size. We're doing good. The next thing we need to do is change the compression, file format and compression. And instead of JPEG, we're going to go to WebP. WebP, image quality, we're going to come down to 30. Now, generally speaking, you can get away with 20, but because I haven't looked at these, I'm going to use 30. And then alpha quality down to 0, because we don't have any type of alpha on these images. Okay, this extra stuff here doesn't overly matter for what we're trying to do. You can go ahead and keep it. It doesn't make much of a difference in terms of file size. And next, what we're going to do is come over to add images. All right, we're going to add all open images. So that's going to give us both that are opened over here. And then we're going to change the output folder. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to go back to storage. I'm going to go back to alpha state. All right, courses, intro to web, fall, in class labs, HTML, intro, start, pictures, and we're finally there. We're going to hit OK here. And then we're going to click apply. Processed. There's one. Okay. Awesome. Let's go ahead and minimize this. And notice that we have our WebP images. And they're smaller. Cool. That's not what I was looking for. So it's always good to make sure that these things are actually doing what you want them to do. Start pictures. Okay, yeah, it's in the right location. So let's open up GIMP again. I'm relatively certain that we did not crop the pixels away. Delete crop pixels. Current layer only. Is not. These settings are right. Interesting. Batch. Let's try this again. Pixels. We're going to go down to 500. I also want this as a pixel. Preserve. All right. Format and compression. Okay. 30. There we go. Open images. And if this doesn't work for some reason, I'll do this by hand. There's only 2, but okay, I'm going to click apply here. It's going to give me a warning to replace these. I'm going to go ahead and do so. Okay, going to open this back up. Very interesting. All right, could be this. So I'm going to export as WebP, replace. Okay. Very interesting. All right, I'll spend a little time after this demonstration why that might be, why that crop didn't work. Very interesting indeed. So we got to move on. Let's get past this problem here. So export as. There we go. Replace. Same settings. Okay, so we're doing good now. We are doing good. So let's go ahead and minimize this now. Now we got our pictures. Cool. Now we need to recreate this little example here. All right. So first thing that I'm going to do, as we do with all HTML documents, is we're going to start with doctype, and we're going to tell it HTML5. Okay. So I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut here. It is Control-KC. All right, and this is going to give you a little wrapping for comments. All right. Tell the which HTML type this is. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to cut that, and then I'm going to put it right next to here. If I did that little keyboard shortcut with that tag already existing, it would have wrapped the tag as well, which is pretty annoying. Okay, next thing that we're going to need is the HTML tag itself. Okay, remember that this is a root tag. We're going to have head here. So this is the metadata for the document itself. Now, I'm going to have to admit here that I don't use meta tags very often because I don't build the websites from scratch very often. So I always have to look these up. So meta tags, HTML. Notice that it's W3 School again, so a pretty good resource. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy these, and then I'm going to get rid of the ones that I don't need. All right, so here we go. I'm going to close that. So we have our meta charset UTF-8. So this is telling the browser how we're going to encode our strings. Okay, super important. We definitely need that. Description doesn't overly matter. This is a SEO thing. Same thing with keywords and author. So if you're ever wondering how those like APA sites get author data, this is how right here. All right, so we're going to get rid of that. Don't need any of the SEO stuff for now. Okay, and then we're going to use meta viewport. So this tells the browser how to render this. Okay, awesome. Body. So all of our visible content needs to go inside of the body tag. All right. So the next thing that we need, since we're recreating this, is, well, we could go H1 here and just leave it like this. But generally speaking, you're going to want some sort of control over that content. Okay. So first thing that I'm going to do is div. And then I'm going to come up here and give it an attribute. I'm going to give it an attribute of ID. I'm going to call this main container, like so. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give that header tag its place now. Okay. So trek, bikes. There's our H1. All right. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create another container. And I'm going to give it an ID, and I'm going to go road bikes, like so. And then I'm going to give it a class. So up to this point, we haven't done a whole lot or anything right now with CSS. But for the time being, just believe me that we're going to need this class. And we're going to call it container. There we go. We're going to open this up. And we're going to do another one. Another div. Another ID. We're going to call this Madone container. Like so. All right. And then we're going to give this, need to come up here. We need an H2 here to represent our road bike section. Road bikes. And then we're going to need an H3 down here for Madone. And then we need a, yeah, we'll put a div here. So div, actually no ID, class image container, like so. And then inside of that image container, we are going to need image, an attribute of source. And I'm going to give you guys a couple seconds to catch up on this. So pause the video if you need to. Okay, so assuming that you guys are back on track and you have this, we actually need to go get this image. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we're going to open up the file explorer here, and right here is index. So when we do file pathing, you should always do it relative pathing when you're talking about web. All right. So what I mean by that is from this location, from index.html, where is this image that we are looking for? Well, it's up a directory, so .. And notice that Visual Code here is trying to autocomplete for me. And also notice that I did this wrong. .. brought me up too far. .. gets me where I want to go. I wanted pictures, and I definitely wanted Madone, but I want WebP instead of JPEG. Okay. There is that. Now I'm going to save this. Okay. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this file with live server. Bang. Awesome. All right. So clearly I have a bigger image than what I do over here. So I'm a little curious. I forgot what my sizes were on this. Okay. I don't have any CSS. Good start. Good start. All right. 350. So my image is a little bit different in terms of size. So yeah. So our image size is a little different. That is okay. All right. So we got 500 pixels here. And honestly, this is probably better because it shows one of the behaviors of images. All right. So we got check bikes, road bikes, and Badone. We have our bike itself. All right. Now we need to do the same thing for the Emonda. All right. So what we're going to do, instead of road bikes, blah, 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 we're going to highlight from here to here. Okay. Now I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut. It's Alt-Shift and then down arrow. Bang. And that just copied all of that. I'm going to close this now because I don't need it. Okay, so instead of Madone container, we need Emonda. I don't know how to spell that. Okay, Emonda. There we go. So there's that. Need to replace this. And then this. All right, so there's that. We quickly copied that over. We're going to save that. We're going to see what we got. And here's our title, and then here's our picture. All right, so we're doing pretty good there. Now, one of the things that we had over here was content 1, content 2. This is purely for demonstration to show you inline elements. Okay, now notice up to this point, we haven't used one. Actually, that's a lie. Image is an inline element, but we really haven't used one inline element, not yet. So just for the sake of demonstration, to show you the difference between a block element and an inline element, we're going to do a span, content 1. And then we're going to copy that over. We're going to do content 2. We're going to save. We're going to go back to the original file and notice that we have content 1 and content 2 under our bikes now. Okay. So with that said, all right, for the, I'll go through these. Okay, headers are self-explanatory. Let's explain this real quick. So, what I'm doing right now is going through these, each logical checkpoint and trying to give you guys, hey, this is what this thing is trying to do, okay? If you read the attributes, it's pretty self-explanatory. Let's spell bikes right over here. Road bikes. It's pretty self-explanatory, but hey, you never know. All right, so container, and a lot of these will make more sense here in the coming presentations when we start adding CSS to this, why I'm doing it like this, but container, like so. Okay, and then the last one here, I'm just going to go source is path to image, use relative pathing. Okay, I'm going to save that. Okay, so we're going to keep those notes there for a little while. And for the people that are on YouTube and not Alfred State students, generally speaking, you want to add conceptual notes inside of your code for new developers that are walking into this that don't necessarily understand why you did something, especially when you get into legacy code bases. It gets very, very confusing very, very quickly if you just kind of, this is what I did, and you don't put any notes there or explain why you did that. It causes a lot of problems. So this is always a good habit to get into. So I'm going to save that. And up to this point, we're good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this over just to make sure it's exactly the same. Okay, in class lab, start, copy. And I'm going to paste this and I'm going to replace. Okay, I'm going to close this and then I'm going to close this. Try again. This is closed. Why is this a problem? Okay, end and end. Okay, try again. There we go. File Explorer, yay. Okay, so awesome. Up to this point, if you're still following along, we did some basic HTML. Hopefully that worked for you. If you're an Alfred State student and that didn't, reach out to me. That's pretty basic. We need to get that up and running. With that said, we're going to be going over CSS, the basics of CSS in the next presentation with the demonstration portion on top of that to show you why we constructed our HTML the way we did. But we're heading forward here. We're going to be going through this kind of quick, and then we're going to be going over how to actually build a website from scratch and structure it the way it should be, and also show you that some of these websites are not nearly as hard as what a lot of people make them out to be. Okay, so with that said, that's all I got for this one, and I'll see you in the CSS presentation. Later.